Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Jim Norton tweets, Cracker Barrel is going to keep their original logo. The old man is staying on the logo. Holy S, what a victory. Take a moment to give yourselves a round of applause. No joke there, but it was good to hear from Jim Norton. I just watched Kill Tony on Netflix. I have some notes, but I'll start with the Jim Norton part. I thought Jim was pretty funny. I thought the material was better than what the audience gave him back. I did have a visceral reaction. Now, I've worked with Jim both at SiriusXM and then on the UFC podcast. And as I looked at Jim, I went, oh, Jim looks like 10 years older. And I realized I probably look 10 years older too, but I haven't actually seen or been in a room with Jim Norton in quite a few years at this point. I have come to the conclusion I like the Kill Tony podcast a lot because when I listen to the Kill Tony podcast, I'm listening at 2.3 speed and I have 30-second skip at my disposal. As for Kill Tony on Netflix, I don't think it's working. If they're going to do it as a Netflix special, they can't just do the normal thing, even if they're at Madison Square Garden. It needs a producer. Here's my note. So I watched the most recent episode on Netflix, and it was 7.5 minutes before a comedian took the stage. That's an eternity. We don't need all the intros and all that. And then the first comedian that they picked out of the hat was terrible. So, that's a lot of barrier to entry to a casual. Kill Tony doesn't need my notes. They're doing just fine. They're selling out Madison Square Garden. But in terms of a Netflix show, it needs a little help there. That sound you heard last night was me screaming at the TV in the new episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Patton Oswalt, who normally I really like. Patton Oswalt played a Vulcan. The Vulcan's name is Doug. If you understand Star Trek, you A, don't write for Strange New Worlds, and B, understand why I'm annoyed. If you don't understand Star Trek, just trust me. It's really, really annoying. Maybe I'll dive into Star Trek next week on the DCN 8 bonus episodes. Bradley Cooper has a movie coming out. It is the story of how John Bishop got into comedy. It is called Is This Thing On? I will be curious as it gets closer to see how real-life comedians nitpick the movie's depiction of stand-up comedy. They usually have a problem with that. The film is directed by Bradley Cooper. It is based on John Bishop's story of getting into stand-up after his marriage broke up. Will Arnett plays Alex, who seeks a new life in the New York comedy scene. Laura Dern plays the wife. Comedian Chloe Radcliffe, who plays a stand-up comedian in the movie, said, I think Will and John sat next to each other at a dinner 10 years ago, and Will heard a story and was like, that rules. I want to do that someday. So anyway, that's the movie. Cooper's in the film himself, playing Will Arnett's character's best friend. Also appearing in the movie, Peyton Manning. Why? I don't know. Green Day are putting out a comedy. Why? I don't know. They're working on a wild road trip comedy titled New Year's Rev. Green Day promises the movie is packed with your favorite Green Day songs, as well as, quote, loaded with mischief, unquote. Some of the stars of the film include Fred Armisen, second mention in 2 days, Jenna Fisher from The Office, Angela Kinsey from The Office, comedian Bobby Lee. The film will make its world premiere September 12th at the Toronto International Film Festival. The description is a garage rock trio gets the opportunity of a lifetime to open up for Green Day and hit the road across America to make the gig. The only problem is they didn't realize it was a prank. Johnny Mac, you never mentioned Marc Maron. I know, right? He caught up with People. Maron is beginning to do promotion for the documentary Anxiety Club. Maron said, there's a lot of things I don't give a hoot about that I used to. There were big anxiety-producing things. I think with age and certainly with money, a lot of that stuff is just sort of null and void, and it's a relief. In the documentary, spoiler, Maron reveals that his anxiety stopped him from having children. Maron said, I'm not sad about it. My panic and worry level operates in just such a way that it just seems like a nightmare to me. He has accepted his anxiety, saying, what do you think we're going to do? Like if you're incapacitated and your life is unmanageable for whatever reason, yeah, you should fix that. If you're uncomfortable, but you're okay, that might just be you. The podcast turns 16 years old on Monday. 16 years, it's a long time. It's a long time to do anything. And certainly, I've said recently while I'm living it, I don't feel like time is passing by quickly, but all of a sudden you're old and you realize you've been doing something for a long time. Jimmy Fallon has yet another gig, and I think as lame as this idea is, this gets into Fallon does a lot more things for NBC than Colbert did for CBS. I don't know if Colbert was unwilling. Perhaps CBS never asked, but factually, Fallon does a lot of these things. A new show, On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, places Jimmy Fallon at the head of his own advertising agency. He's joined by Chief Marketing Officer Bozoma St. John, who I'm supposed to know who that is. Apparently, she's someone on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. On brand, she'll act as mentor and judge, guiding contestants. So I'm wondering what Jimmy Fallon does on the show. The competitors will pitch to companies, including a famous rum company with a pirate on it, a national donuts chain that I sometimes go to, and some others. The show's winner will receive $100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, except I looked up from website Simul Media. They say NBC gets $200,000 for a 30. So if we show one ad, we've paid off the grand prize. I know there's production company costs and write-ups and Jimmy Fallon's salary and the nice lady from Real Housewives of whatever I said. They all got to get paid, but $200,000 an ad is the low rate for NBC. If you want to advertise on Sunday Night Football, Simul Media says that will cost $882,000 for a 30. Anyway, when you win this show with Jimmy Fallon, you'll receive $100,000 minus taxes, a feature in Adweek, a VIP trip to the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity, and the title, Innovator of the Year. I've got a must-read for you, Gary Kroeger. If you're of a certain age, remember Gary Kroeger from Saturday Night Live? I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you were like, who? Well, he's got a Substack. So do I. My link is in the show notes. Gary Kroeger... And hat tip to Late Nighter for putting this on my radar. Gary Kroeger was reacting to the Devin Walker departure notice, and Kroeger said, when I was at SNL from 82 to 85, women struggled unfairly to get material in the show. The show by nature is competitive, and egos are equal parts fragile and inflated every week and feel like your career was just made or just sank to a depth no rescue vehicle can reach. That can create a toxic, ripe environment. Now, I'm going to point out that was during the Dick Ebersol years, not the Lorne Michaels year. So apparently it's been a toxic environment at least more than once, according to people on the show. Gary Kroeger writes, I have few regrets, but I'd be lying if I say I'm okay with the fact that producer-creator Lorne Michaels treats the Dick Ebersol years, when I was with the show, as if they didn't exist. I agree with Gary there. They do act like those years mostly didn't exist, and he makes some great points here coming up. I believe that Cold Shoulder is rooted in the same toxicity Walker refers to. It's an imbalance of perception that starts at the top, not because of any public or industry reverence for the Ebersol years, but because of a shortcoming in Lorne Michaels, who ignores the fact that others have contributed to a show. I have no relationship with Lorne Michaels, and I've never met him. I've passed him in the hall at SNL reunions. And then Gary drops the bomb and he goes, no one, not even Michaels, can overlook the fact that Eddie Murphy emerged from a show called Saturday Night Live when Lorne was not at the helm. I've never heard that point made before. That, Gary Kroeger, is a great bleeping point. Gary goes on to say, who else was on the show? Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Gary writes, Lorne doesn't even include 5 years, 100 shows as part of his SNL package. Very rarely does anything from that era show up in a reunion retrospective, but the stars are asked to participate in the live portions. I'm always a little surprised, in fact, that I get a ticket to the gala reunions every 5 or 10 years, but I do. I think because other people involved with the show and NBC do care, the staff always treats me and other second or third tier cast members very well. Fans of SNL and podcasts revolving around the show regard the Ebersol years as simply that particular era, but not a different show. They love, and this is a good list, and that was the SNL I got into. I was a little young for the original cast, and even that Jean Demunian, what is her name? That season, the really awful season. But I was watching the Gary Kroeger years, and Gary says people like me love Joe Piscopo, who I think has just been totally overlooked and deserves better. Joe Piscopo, Tim Kazurinsky, Robin Duke, Mary Gross, Brad Hall, Christine Ebersol, and even Gary Kroeger. And he asks, why no respect from Lorne Michaels? Just in, as I'm recording the show, Emil Wakim has announced he's leaving SNL. I don't even have this in my script. I'm reading it off my phone. On Instagram, he posted, I won't be returning to SNL next year. It was a gut punch of a call to get, but I'm so grateful for my time there. He did one season, one and done for him, and I feel bad for the folks at LateNighter.com who thought they were taking this week off. No, you're not. Getting a little long here. I wanted to tell you about Joe Coy. He's probably really excited about Taylor Swift getting engaged. You may recall one time Taylor Swift was too cool for school and couldn't possibly smile at a Joe Coy joke. I won't play it for you right now because we're getting along. You probably know the story if you've listened to this podcast before, but I feel bad for Joe Coy. He's up in Canada. And he said, I'm a coffee guy. I love it. I can't function without coffee. I love the adventure of finding like a real coffee shop, but I don't want to go to a chain. I don't want to go to Starbucks. I want local. And he's got a story about going to see Ozzy Osbourne's last show, but I will bounce that to tomorrow because I want to tell you what the worst person in the world, Jay Leno, is up to. You know that guy. I mean, the nerve of that guy to have an opinion about late-night comedy. What does he know about doing comedy or hosting a late-night show? And then he chimes in on the whole subject, and that's why everybody is mad at Jay Leno, who is the worst person who ever lived, apparently. Jay, if you're listening, it's not how I feel. It's a bit. On the most recent episode of Jay Leno's Garage, which you can find on YouTube, he was out with Jeff Dunham, you know, the puppets guy. They took a tank for a test drive on Southern California streets. Jeff Dunham, who's 63 now, jumped in the driver's seat of the tank to learn how to handle the tank. It's apparently steered by using 2 levers and a foot-operated transmission. Jay Leno, who's 75, highlighted some of the features of the tank, including the 76mm main gun, the smoke grenade launchers, and the periscope used for driving when the hatch is closed. It is a 1972 Alvis Scorpion, a light-duty tank capable of reaching 51 miles an hour. One social media commenter said about the worst person in the world, "I knew Jay just loves about everything with a motor and wheels as much as anyone, but this is hilarious. Dude is living his best life in retirement." The President of the United States took to social media at 2 a.m. and wrote, "There's a sick rumor going around that fake news NBC extended the contract of one of the least talented late-night television hosts out there, Seth Meyers. He has no ratings, talent, or intelligence, and the personality of an insecure child. So why would fake news NBC extend this dope's contract? I don't know, but I'll definitely be finding out." And is what the president is up to these days? Beck Bennett told a story about the president to the Last Laugh podcast. He was talking about the time the president hosted SNL and said at the table read, Trump was having a little bit of trouble reading. At one point, Trump apparently interrupted the table read to take a phone call that seemed to be bad news. Trump hung up the phone. Leslie Jones said, "How much money did you make on that phone call?" Beck Bennett said everybody laughed but Trump, who said he just found out his book went to #1 on the bestseller list. Everybody clapped, but it was like, really? It didn't sound like you were dealing with the news that your book went to *1, but okay. Bennett says Trump didn't like getting notes or getting corrected. Quoting Beck Bennett, he'd be like, "No, that's what I said." But he was just kind of loafing around and was just a lot to have him there, but he wasn't particularly awful beyond that, I don't think. As far as having billionaire personalities come on the show, Elon Musk was a lot more offensive. That was harder to deal with. He had very odd ideas, and he was very rude and less predictable to perform with. In a way, Trump was a little bit more like, you tell me where to go and what to say, and I'll tell you if I'm okay with it. Are you in Indianapolis? The Let's Fest kicks off tonight. The group Let's Comedy is producing the 5th annual Comedy and Music Festival. Appearing at Let's Fest, Ron Funches, Robbie Hoffman, Carmen Christopher, and Joe Pera is there. Nouveau caught up with Joe Pera. They asked Joe, "A lot of your work seems to come back to the topic of sleep. How's your sleep routine?" Joe Pera said, "It's fine. I wish it was better. Everybody does. I feel like the older I get, the harder it is, especially as your life gets busier. Touring isn't ideal for sleep, but I've also learned that when you're up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, it's best to not worry about it. Just relax, go in the kitchen, eat a banana with some peanut butter. Don't waste your time trying to fall back asleep and be okay with being up in the middle of the night." That's what Johnny Mac does. I listen to a lot of podcasts around 2 a.m. until I drift back off. Joe Pera, what comes to your mind when you think about Indianapolis as a city? Joe said, "Truly, I was shocked by how big the pork sandwiches were last time." And that is your comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.